Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why heavy barbell movements are not inherently unsafe, why they are safe to do. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this, because this is something that comes up a lot out there. A lot of people who feel like heavy barbell work is somehow dangerous, or that even hitting a 1-rep max is a dangerous activity. And the reality is, if you go about it intelligently, it really isn't. And truth be told, and this is going to be a shock to a lot of people, proper form on big barbell lifts, big compound movements are actually safer. And yeah, I do believe that they are actually safer than a lot of other exercises. Again, assuming you understand basic technique and bar paths, and you know how to load progressively. And that's because all of your barbell movements, because they usually require you to stabilize your body, the load is distributed across a large number of joints, ligaments, and tendons. In other words, because the heavy loads are distributed through a large number of areas through the body instead of isolated in one spot, your body tends to be able to compensate better. In other words, those one areas don't give out. You tend to shift towards another area if there's something weak that might be about to give or get hurt. Your natural tendency, particularly once you've developed a skill for the lift, is going to tend to distribute the load into a place that isn't going to get hurt, because again, it's distributed across a large number of joints. Whereas with an isolation movement, if you were to try to do that, everyone knows that. You see people say that all the time, don't go really heavy on a curl or a tricep extension. They'll tell you, and heavy being relative, don't do really, really low reps. Why? You are far more likely to tear something. You are far more likely to tear something because if all of the load of the weight is distributed across one tendon, it's more likely to give out. It's more likely to snap. Just like we saw with Callan Von Mosier's bicep tear, that stupid heavy cheat curl towards bicep. And that happens actually. We start looking at the different lifts, the strict curl, it's a fair number of bicep tears. In fact, I'll venture to say per capita, people who compete in that more likely to tear a bicep than the deadlift. And the deadlift is famous for that. And I'll get to that in a minute too, because that was my own doing. I have torn my bicep. I've had one major injury from training. And it took a lot for that to happen. That wouldn't have happened under normal circumstances. And yes, there were drugs involved. So, we come over to the point of this. People will also say things like, well, you know, if you just throw 550 on the bar and try to squat it, you're going to get hurt. Well, that's true. But again, if you've learned how to squat correctly, same thing with the bench press. If you learn how to bench press correctly, you know not to take the bar through the path where it's going to get hurt. If you have been taught to perform these movement patterns, because these are basic movement patterns, the human body is designed to do all of these just fine, and to do them under load. They're normal movements, you're just adding progressive resistance. And if you train progressively, your bones get denser, your connective tissue hypertrophies to accommodate that load over time. So if a person has never squatted over 500 pounds and then all of a sudden, just say they have a 495 squat and they try to go to 550, yes, they might get hurt. But if a person tries to squat 500 after they've squatted 495 and they've had several days to adapt, and they use proper safeties to catch the bar if they get pinned, if they fail the 500, and they know the technique and they've built their core up properly to stabilize themselves because they've gradually built up through the 400s for months and months and months and maybe years. They try 500, they're probably not going to get hurt. They try 505 later after they've successfully done 500 and they've had time to rest and recover and to adapt to it, they're going to be fine. And then if they go to 510, and maybe 510 they get stuck there for a little while, so they use micro plates, 1 pound plates, and try 512, they are probably not going to get hurt. If you jump straight from 495 to 550, you might get hurt, particularly due to form breakdown and things like that happening, because you haven't acclimated to the load over time. But if you are gradual in your progression, particularly on big barbell exercises, and you learn to maintain good form, you are very unlikely to get hurt. It's usually major form breakdown or bouncing weights that you're not capable of handling is the problem. Or using stuff through an incorrect bar path. Again, bench pressing to your upper chest, right? Trying to use partials all the time. But people who learn the correct bar path, which is the normal, safe movement pattern on a big barbell lift, Nova, calm down, buddy. And they learn to do these things correctly through the correct bar path, and they use weights in which they can control over time. Even extremely heavy weights, you very rarely get hurt. And most accidents as far as tears don't happen unless you're bouncing stuff. Again, people bouncing off the floor on a deadlift so that they use bad form. Because if you bounce the weight off the floor on a deadlift, you don't reset. You can't ensure good technique on every rep. That's when people get hurt. Bouncing the bar off your chest on a bench press. That's how you get hurt. Doing partials in which you don't build full range of motion joint strength and health, eventually you cause some tightness and things, and that's how you get hurt. But controlled lifting with good technique in which you gradually add a couple pounds at a time over the months and years, you're actually unlikely to get hurt, even squatting 550, 600. There are thousands of people who lift these numbers all the time who don't get hurt. Again, it's when we start adding other things to the mix. Bad technique, psyching yourself up too much to lift a weight that you can't handle. Drugs that do this. This is where you get hurt. And perfect example, I created a perfect storm myself where I tore a bicep. How'd that happen? Well, could it be the fact that I was deadlifting 5 days a week? Yeah. And I was using a couple of different substances I probably shouldn't have been using at the time. I was using a substance called Winstrol. And, you know, I don't endorse this because obviously this combination got me hurt, didn't it? Well, that substance has been known to weaken cross bridges in collagen and in connective tissue. There have been studies on that. And so in other words, that substance could weaken connective tissue. All right, I was deadlifting 600 plus pounds 5 days a week without taking adequate recovery. And I was using another substance known as Tren at the time, which is known to increase strength and increase aggression and increase pain threshold. You guys see a problem here? When you start throwing drugs into a mix that cause you to get stronger faster than your connective tissue can adapt, and you push yourself and you fight through pain, and you know what? My tendon had been hurting for 3 weeks. But here's the thing. And by the way, guys, people say, when was this? This was over 14 years ago. Just for the record. This was, I believe, in 2004. A very, very long time ago. And yes, at that point, I quit using anabolics for quite some time. I went natty at that point after hurting myself. So for the record, people are like, oh man, he abused gear for years. And I didn't. Not for decades. It's all this nonsense. But I had a 655 max deadlift at the time, and I was using a lighter weight for me. I was using 605 when I tore it. All right, I had pulled 655 legit 3 months before this injury. So 50 pounds less. So it wasn't even me trying to lift a weight I couldn't handle. It was overuse, overuse, overuse. And I had been experiencing pain in that tendon, in that arm, for 3 weeks, and being stupid and using a substance that increases aggression, increases drive in the gym, increases your pain threshold. Guess what? I kept pushing through the pain, and kept deadlifting 600, 605, 610, 4 or 5 days a week. And I had been doing this for 6 weeks. I had been in pain the final 3 weeks of it, and being young and stupid, I kept fighting through it. Had I just stopped doing that a week sooner and let it heal, I would have never gotten that injury. So when we look at this, you pretty much have to be an idiot to get hurt deadlifting. You really do. You have to be fighting through pain. You have to be doing stupid stuff to your body, pushing beyond your limits, not letting yourself heal. That's what it took before I had an injury. And I would suggest to you, a lot of these guys who get these injuries, that's how it's happening. Same thing, people talk about their knees on the squat, but then they use knee wraps. Well, knee wraps damage your knees. You know what else damages your knees? Leg extensions. And then they'll blame the squat. The squat destroyed my knees. No, knee wraps with the leg extensions destroyed your knees. You only felt it because of the squats. Same thing, you know, they'll talk about, oh, the big heavy bench pressing hurts my elbows, and you go look at the way they perform tricep extensions, and they have tendonitis here in their tendons because of the way that they do some isolation movement, and then they blame the big heavy barbell movement. Heavy bench press is perfectly safe for your elbows. You know what? Done correctly, if you can bring it to your chest, pause and press it out, a 400-pound bench press is perfectly safe on your elbows. It becomes unsafe for your elbows when you start doing rack lockouts with 600 pounds when you can only bench 400 off your chest. And then you do it over and over and over and over. All right, that might hurt your elbows. The 400, if you're capable of doing it through the full range of motion, that lockout at the top is never going to hurt your elbows because you're acclimated to that. It's well within your capabilities of your joints and connective tissue. And then you combine that with doing a bunch of tricep extensions in a manner that causes calcium deposits and inflammation to build up on the tendons. And yeah, then your elbow hurts. It's not the bench press that did it. So just food for thought, guys. These are safe movements if done correctly with good technique, where you control the weight, you don't bounce it off of yourself, bounce it off the floor, use silly bar pass, attempts to use loads that are much heavier than you used in the past, or you don't do just so much volume that you can't recover and you get overuse injuries. Barbell movements are safe. Barbell movements are safe. In fact, I'll venture to say that you are less likely, done correctly, to get hurt doing most of these exercises than you are doing a heavy curl or a tricep extension or a leg extension. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.